Sheikh Suhaib Hasan, he's a well-known scholar. I mean, he doesn't really need any presentation. He's been there the most of the time. He's been teaching us 5 years courses on Usul al-Fiqh, Usul al-Hadith with us, and now we're currently following the course on Sahih Bukhari, Kitab Tawhid with him. And Sheikh Suhaib Hasan, I mean, like Sheikh Ahmad Lakvi and Adnan Rasheed, the ancestors, they had ijazah from Mian Nazirus and Delvi. And Sheikh Suhaib Hasan himself has completed the tafsir of the Quran many times with hadith. I mean, the Quran is one of his speciality. And his father as well, he had some work done in translating, from benefiting from the tafsir of Sheikh Rasheed Rida. We have in the group as well the grandson of Sheikh Rasheed Rida, Sheikh Fuad Rida, who's going to follow this lesson because I sent him a poster. So, inshallah, without any further ado, Sheikh Suhaib Hasan will speak about the impact of this tafsir, because it was one of the greatest tafsir to bring people close to Tawhid and Sunnah in the beginning of the century. And the magazine and the tafsir had a great impact for the educated youth at the time in which many starting to become secular or communist. This tafsir brought them closer to the religion. So, without any further ado, I will ask Sheikh Suhaib Hasan to start his talk.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I'm very thankful to Masjidul Ikhlas, to our brother Ali Hassan, on arranging this conference. Among the topics of this conference is this one about a great scholar of Islam, a great reformer of Islam, a great personality of Egypt, Shaykh Rasheed Rida. Now, this speech is going to cover his life and also some aspects of his great work through Tafsir al-Manar. But I'm going to touch on different aspects of his life, including his religious and political reforms. Just imagine a person who lived in this earth for 70 years only, from 1865 to 1935, just 70 years. What a great impact he has done on the lives of a great number of believers at that time. Among his contemporaries, and I have to mention especially those in subcontinent at that time, like a great poet, Allama Iqbal, who also died just three years after him in 1938. And he is known with his poetry and with his thought upon ijtihads, upon reformation. And we can also mention the great movement by Sayyid Ahmad Shaheed and Shah Ismail Shaheed. And they were both martyred in 1931 in Balakot after their encounter with the Sikhs or the Sikh commanders in that area. So we can see that that was a time when it was imperialism in Egypt, in India, and so many other countries. And of course, there were Muslims who were trying to bring some reforms in face of so many bid'at innovations which have been introduced in each and every part of the world. Now, coming back to Shaykh Rasheed al-Rida, he was born in Qalamun, which is just 3 miles away from Tripoli in Lebanon. Tripoli, I have visited this town, a very famous town with Islamic culture and great Muslim or Islamic personalities. he himself goes back in his family tree to Sayyidina Hussein ibn Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. So he is, of course, a Sayyid. It means that his family have migrated from the area of Al-Hijaz long ago to Al-Iraq, and from Iraq they have come back to Syria because Lebanon is used to be a part of Syria, and they settled down in Qalamun, where his father has established a mosque. His father was a person from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the Mazhab of Imam Shafi'i, and his mother Fatima is from Ahlul Bayt, from the family of Ahlul Bayt, you can say. All his learning right from the beginning was in that area, and when he finished his Islamic studies in Quran and Sunnah, mostly in his own town and around it. Right from the beginning, he was known with this sharp intelligence. It is mentioned about him that the governor of Tripoli, who was appointed by the Ottomans, he criticized the Ottomans that why they have exempted the students of knowledge and the scholars from the military service. Just like all other young people, they should not be, in his opinion, they should not be exempted. At that time, Shaykh Rasheed Rida, he read to him the ayah of Surah At-Tawbah, وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ وَلِيُنْذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ. It is very clear from this ayah that not all the believers have to go out, means for jihad. So why not from each and every faction, a group remains behind to learn deen, to become faqih in deen, to have understanding of deen, so that when the people come back to them from jihad, وَلِيُنْذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ, so they can warn them, إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ, when they return back to them, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ, so they can take their precautions. There was another personality, a great person, Jamaluddin al-Afghani, who was known during that time. Jamaluddin al-Afghani remained 8 years in Egypt, from 1874 to 1882. And he was known with his very intelligent pupil, Muhammad Abduh. And he was also known with his political thoughts and his writings against the imperialism, against the English rule at that time there. So Muhammad Abduh was expelled from Egypt and he came to Beirut, where Rasheed Rida got a golden opportunity to meet him and to learn from him. Afghani himself, he went to Paris. From there, he started publicizing his famous organ, his famous paper known by the name of Al-Urwatul Wusqa, the strong knot. That was in 1883, which became very famous, but it stopped circulations after 7 months. Rasheed Rida used to copy that paper by his own handwriting, which shows that how keen he was to take some thoughts from that political magazine. That political magazine which got this ideology that Islam is not just a religion of spiritual elevation, but it deals with the worldly matters as well, so that the man could be a vicegerent of Allah in this earth. Rasheed Rida, later he went to Egypt in 1898, where he met once again his teacher Muhammad Abduh. He never saw Jamaluddin al-Afghani in his life, but his association was mainly with Muhammad Abduh, his Shaykh. So he was impressed by him in many of his thoughts. When he met him after coming to Egypt by sea, he landed at Al-Iskandariya, Alexandria, in 1898. And when he came to Egypt, he has to pass by Tanta, where he saw the people circulating, making tawaf around the grave of Sayyid al-Badawi. So he reported this matter to his Shaykh, and of course, Shaykh Muhammad Abduh did not approve this act at all. Even he was stopping the people to go to the Mawlid of Sayyida Zainab. And people used to listen to him. And when Rasheed Rida went to Egypt, he consulted his Sheikh Muhammad Abduh to publicize his magazine, which is known to be as Al-Manar. And Muhammad Abduh told him that this is a good idea, but with three conditions. And he laid down these three conditions: that he is not going to be an organ of any group or party. Secondly, if he was criticized, he should not start refuting all what is said about him. And thirdly, that he should not become a spokesman for any person of authority. So this is how he started printing Al-Manar, which started on 22nd of Shawwal, 1315 of Hijrah, corresponding to March 1898. He has started this magazine. Could he be thinking that this magazine is going to last for the next 35 years? Because he has issued 34 volumes of his magazine. And the last one was volume number 35. And that was the year of his death, which is 1835. So two issues came out in this volume 35. And later, the successor, his own brother, Muhyiddin Rida, he also published two more prints of that magazine, two more numbers of this magazine. And later, Shaykh Hasan al-Banna, the famous Shaykh in Egypt, he also issued 6 numbers of this magazine. But eventually, it stopped from being circulating among the people in 1940 because of an order from the government of Hussein Siri Pasha. And that was the time when the Second World War has already in its peak. So you can say that this magazine remained 40 years propagating the deen of Islam and serving Islam and the Muslims. Among the most distinguished characteristics of this magazine is that it aims at reforming the Ummah and especially to renew the message of Al-Azhar, the 1,000-year-old seminary of Islam, which was originally established by Al-Fatimiyin in Al-Qahira, in Cairo. But 200 years later, when Salahuddin al-Ayyubi was able to bring an end to the rule of Fatimiyin, Al-Azhar became the organ of Al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. But of course, the history of Al-Azhar is so long, and Shaykh Rasheed Rida, and before him Shaykh Muhammad Abduh, they wanted to bring some reforms, and we are going to touch on this point further, inshallah. We can say that Rasheed Rida, he is in his theology is more nearer to the Salafi movement, because that is when the movement of Shaykh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab was also known to many Muslims throughout the Muslim land and even the non-Muslim lands. His teachings were known, and of course that was the time when Malik Abdul Aziz has taken Al-Hijaz in 1924, and he has established the kingdom of Saudi at that time. And he was supportive, of course, of the thoughts of Al-Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, and he is following the teachings of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And he liked these thoughts and teachings of both these two Shaykh to be printed and publicized through the great press which Rasheed Rida has established in Egypt. So the books of Shaykhain, they used to be printed there in Egypt. So that is a great sign that Shaykh Rasheed Rida himself was a supportive of these Salafi thoughts. And in his own life, we have seen that how he did not approve the practice of the Sufi faction known as Al-Mawlawiyah. And they are an offshoot of Jalaluddin of Rumi. And nowadays, even the circle of Darwish, or the circles of Darwish, are very much known throughout the Muslim land. It still continues. Anyhow, Shaykh Rasheed Rida did criticize them. And once when he saw them, he was so much agitated that he said very clearly to them, this is a munkar, and it is not right to just keep quiet without challenging them. And he said that your practice is nothing except what has been described in the Quran about Ahlul Kitab, ittakhadhu deenakum huzuwan wa la'iba, that they have taken your deen as a jest and as a sport, as a play. He did this nasiha and advice while he was in the mosque, and then he left the mosque with his followers. In the same way, he also criticized one of a great authority in Beirut among the governments, those people who used to have golden watches and chains, they used to wear them. And of course, that is not allowed in Islam. And once he was asked by the governor of Trablus, Hassan Pasha, to deliver a short speech as a nasiha. So he utilized that time, and he's spoken about reforming in the Ottoman way of ruling. He said that justice should prevail and there should be no injustice done to any person or any faction in the entire land ruled by Ottomans. He used to do his part of Nasiha through al-khutbah and through other speeches in his own mosque, which was established by his grandfathers in Qalamun. And he used to go to coffee houses to just admonish the people. He got lessons, especially for the women as well. He has written his book, Al-Hikmatu Shar'iyya, and that is the Shar'i wisdom, and that is just to refute two Sufi factions of Qadiriyya and Rifa'iyya. And that is the refutations of a book by Muhammad Abil Huda as-Sayyadi. He was a Sufi and he was very much close to the Ottoman Emperor Sultan Abdul Hamid II. Rasheed Rida was also known about such innovations which are related to having tombs on the graves, and then other practices which are normally done when people use to visit the graves of the saints, and then they try to invoke their names, ask to them. Women to place in the niche of a tomb of Sheikh Muhammad al-Qusaybani, and he spoke against it. In the very same way, in Beirut, he saw that women, they used to bring some torn pieces of cloths and hang them on a hanger, which was a tree or something similar to that, on the seashore, seeking for cure. Of course, that is a wrong practice, and he said that you have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure the ill persons. And the very same way, they used to have some trees, sacred trees, and they used to go there and then invoke the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through going to visit such type of trees. So he ordered his followers to uproot such type of trees at all. So we can say that he was very much impressed by the teachings of Al-Imam ibn Taymiyyah and Shaykh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. And when he started publishing his magazine Al-Manar, he has taken upon his shoulder to defend the teachings, the teachings of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah and Imam Abdul Wahhab, and whatever has been said against them. He heard that at that time, in 1903, when the government started having a great celebration. Why? Because 100 years or a century has passed upon the rule of Muhammad Ali Pasha, and those who came after him. And so the mosque were decorated, and a lot of lights were lit there to celebrate the century of their rule. Rasheed Rida did not tolerate it, and he criticized such an action, which of course was not in line with the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah. In his magazine Al-Manar, he started with the tafsir of his Shaykh Muhammad Abduh. Muhammad Abdu has died in 1905. And he has reached to ayah 126 of Surah An-Nisa in his tafsir. When Shaykh Muhammad Abdu died, and then Rasheed Rida started his own explanation of the meanings of the Quran, and he remained writing his tafsir, and that was a great act attributed to him. When he died in 1935, he was writing the tafsir of Surah Yusuf, and he has reached the end of Surah Yusuf. Do you know which ayah he was writing at that time? Ayah number 101 of Surah Yusuf, which says, that is the saying of Sayyidina Yusuf, which has been reported in Surah Yusuf. رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت ولي في الدنيا والآخرة توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين. That was the last ayah which has been touched by Rasheed Rida at that time. Rasheed Rida, as we have said, that he was the great support of the Sunnah, and he was challenging the innovations and bid'ah. But on the other hand, he has some odd opinions based upon rationale only, based upon aql or intellect only. And that is going to touch a number of points. So we are not here to speak about them. There are many points, and I think that there should be a separate speech about such type of thoughts which has been propounded by Rasheed Rida, because to me they are totally unacceptable, which are related to denying most of the signs of the last day, whether they are major signs or minor signs, and also his denial of the existence of magic. He denies that Prophet ﷺ was never under the spell of that touch of magic which was done by a Jew upon him, and which has been reported in Sahih al-Bukhari. In the same way, his denial of some of the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, including the split of the moon, and in the same way, his explanation of the night journey of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is known as al-Isra, and then to the heaven al-Miraj, that it was just a vision and it did not happen physically. And he was in line with the idea of his Shaykh Muhammad Abdu about the angels, that they are some type of natural forces. And he also agreed with the idea of his teacher Muhammad Abdu, that Sayyidina Adam, he was the grandfather of all humanity. He denied that as well, let alone the denial of the ahadith related to Ad-Dajjal and to the hadith of Al-Jassasa in Sahih Muslim, and the coming of Al-Mahdi, and the descent of Sayyidina Al-Masih before the last day, and also the rising of the sun from the west instead of east. These are the few things which I must say that they need to be discussed very deeply in a separate speech. Now, there might be some questions about such issues. This is why I want this topic to be discussed separately. In the same way, he got some odd opinion in fiqh as well. For example, he said that it is allowed for a traveler to do tayammum, this dry ablution, even if he got water with him, or he can see the water in front of him. There are some other opinions which are advanced by him. And again, this topic should be associated or should be joined with the first topic which I have just mentioned. He has written a lot of books, around 30. Among the most important books, important titles are As-Sunnah wa Shia, and his Risala of Tawheed, his book about the rule of King Abdulaziz in Al-Hijaz. The title is Al-Wahhabiyun wal-Hijaz, and his exhaustive work about his teacher, Al-Imam Muhammad Abduh. And then when he was speaking about the reformation of Al-Azhar, of course, he was criticized by the scholars of Al-Azhar. So this is why he has written another book called Al-Manar wal-Azhar. And another book which was a title, one of our brothers have spoken about his book Al-Wahi al-Muhammadi in the very same conference of yours. And he spoke about Al-Muslimuna wal-Qibt, the Copts. One of the books is Huquq al-Nisa'i fil Islam. And I have also mentioned the book Refutations of the Sufi Thoughts, Al-Hikmah al-Shar'iyya. But I am more concerned here about the great reformative work which he has done throughout his life. So let me highlight that point. And they can be summarized in some points. The first one is At-Tamassuk bil-Kitab was-Sunnah. That the only way for this ummah to prosper and to regain its glory, that is to go back to the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then, when we are following Kitab and Sunnah, we must not be prejudiced to one madhab in leaving the other madhab. And this shows that this point of the blind taqleed, imitating or following one madhab, that has always been a focus for challenge throughout the ages. And we have been discussing Rasheed Rida during the 19th century and the 20th century. He also spoke on this issue. And the issue of innovations and his invitations to lead the innovations at all completely. Of course, he also propounded the idea of bringing easiness in Islam, which is known as the idea of bringing al-yusr. Ma ja'ala alaykum fi ad-din min haraj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make any matter of difficulty in the matter of deen. We can see that he was impressed in his fiqh research by the great book of Ibn Qudama al-Mughni. On the other side, he was also very keen to bring Sunnah and Shia closer to each other. And in this regard, he has done some work as well. We can see that how he met the ambassador of Iran and asked him to carry a letter from him to the King Abdulaziz Al Saud. And the king asked the ambassador to take the letter, his letter to Rasheed Reza about this conference of 1925, conference in Hijaz. So he has been doing a lot to bring these two great factions of Muslim Ummah nearer to each other. And he said, as a principle, that we should cooperate with each other in all such matters on which we both agree. And the other matters in which we don't agree, we should try to find an excuse for each other. For example, he said that as far as Shia are concerned, there are few things which are common among us and them. For example, the 5 pillars of Islam, all the obscene works, al-fahisha, whether they are hidden or apparent, they are declared haram in Islam. And then it is also common among us the love of Ahlul Bayt and glorifying them. In the very same way, all such benefits which are needed for this ummah in the field of politics and in their social life, in their financial life, in their political life, they're all common among us. We got no difference of opinion about them. Now come to those points in which we differ, and they are, for example, the case of al-imamah and the sayings of Shia that their imams are infallible, and then their criticism of al-Khulafa al-Rashidin are their sayings about them. And in the very same way, the discussions about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasheed Reza said that for each faction, it is all right that they should believe and they should have such beliefs to which their hearts are satisfied, and they should practice whatever is preferred to them on the basis of the evidence, without blaming the other party or the other group, or without slandering the other party or the other group. So he has offered a good principle to them, but the response was not right. The response was not very affirmative or positive. And we see that one of Shia scholars, Abdul Muhsin Nuruddin of Iraq, he wanted to have the door of munazara or debate should be open for him in Al-Manar. Rasheed Reza accepted his challenge, but the man did not comply with the manners of the debate. And he started slandering him in his own magazines called Al-Irfan, slandering the people of Al-Sunnah. And this is why Rasheed Reza was disappointed completely that his efforts in that field did not come true or were not fruitful at all. Let me here mention one of his great achievements. That achievement was about opening a great seminary of knowledge, Madrasatul Da'wati wal Irshad. First, it was agreed that he is going to open it in the seat of Ottoman Empire, Istanbul, which is also known as Al-Asitana. So that was his intention. And though it was approved by the followers of the newly established political group Al-Ittihad wa Taraqi, which was headed by Mustafa Kamal. But they did not support this idea faithfully. So it was not materialized at all. Then he was asked by Al-Khadibi Abbas Hilmi of Egypt to start that project in Cairo. So there he established this Al-Madrasa, which started in 1912. The study began in Rabiul Thani 1330 of Al-Hijrah, corresponding to 1912. And it remained in the field for 4 years till 1916. And we know that in 1917, the Second World War has already started. So it became an excuse for the government in Egypt to cut off all donations and assistance to let the seminary run properly. The main characters of this madrasa or this seminary were like this. Students came from everywhere. They came even from India, from Africa, from Indonesia, let alone from the Arabic lands. It was not based upon the following of one madhab, leaving the other madhab aside. It took care about the spiritual upbringing or tarbiyah of the students. So they used to have Qiyamul Layl, fasting 3 days each month, praying Salatul Zuha, and also trying to do it regularly. There was that degree of Murshid, which was given after the study of 3 years, and the degree of Da'iyah also after 3 years studies. And this seat of knowledge has produced very prominent figures at that time. Among them is Yusuf Yasin, the secretary of King Abdulaziz, Amin al-Husseini, the great Mufti of Palestine, Abdul Razak Malih Abadi, who was an associate to Maulana Abul Kalam Azad in India, Muhammad Bahjat al-Bitar, the great scholar of Syria, Muhammad Hamid al-Fiqhi, the one who established Jamiyat al-Ansar al-Sunnah in Egypt. 2 great Imams of Makkah, of Al-Haram al-Makki, Muhammad Abdul Razak Hamza was Shaykh Abdul Zahir Abu Samh. And even Muhammad Bisyuni Imran of Java, Indonesia. So we can say that this madrasa was a great blessing, and it has impressed Al-Azhar later to introduce the branch of Ad-Da'wah wal-Irshad in the Kulliyah of Usuluddin in Al-Azhar. And there was the very same practice adopted by Jamiatul Imam Muhammad bin Saud al-Islamiyya in Riyadh, let alone the Islamic University of Al-Madinah. So we can see that his efforts were not confined to Egypt, but it has gone out of the boundaries of Egypt. He wanted to bring these reformations to Al-Azhar, and he was successful in many of his introductions. Later we can say that Al-Azhar, especially when Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa al-Maraghi, who was one of the students of Muhammad Abduh, he accepted all what Rasheed Rida has propounded. And we can also say that Al-Azhar has adopted all these reforms except one. What was that one? That in the curriculum of Al-Azhar, there was everything, but there was not much concern about the books of Sunnah, the books of Al-Hadith, which Shaykh Rasheed Rida wanted. And I can say here that this was the same practice we have seen in all the Islamic madaris of India, especially those based upon al-fiqh al-Hanafi, that they got more concerned with the books of fiqh, and they will read those books for years and years. But when it comes to the books of hadith, normally they have just one book of hadith, Mishkatul Masabih, which is taught to the students. And as far as the original 6 books, which are known to be Al-Kutub As-Sitta, the 6 books, Sahih al-Bukhari, Muslim, and 4 Sunan, they are read, but not in details. They might be completed in just 1 year time, in the last year of their studies. Here, I may say we are approaching the end of this speech, that do we see contradiction in the life of Rasheed Rida, that once he was against Sultan Abdul Hamid because of his innovations, and he has written his book Al-Hikmatu Sharia, as I have already said, against the book of Muhammad Abul Huda As-Sayyadi, who was, you can say, a Shaykh of Sultan Abdul Hamid. And during the rule of Sultan Abdul Hamid, the organ of Shaykh Rasheed Rida, his magazine Al-Manar, was not allowed to be circulated in all the Ottoman provinces. So he associated himself with this new party, which is known as Al-Ittihad wa Taraqi. And even he was given a seat, a very prominent seat in their Majlis al-Shura. But later, when he saw that these people are not very sincere to Islam, and they have started the movement of going back to Turk ideologies, not Islam as a whole, but going back to the race of Turk race at that time. And later he also have seen that they were supporting Masonic thoughts, Al-Masuniya. At that time, Rasheed Rida left them. And once again, when he saw Sultan Abdul Hamid taking a very strong stand against the Jews, when they wanted to settle down in Palestine, and they wanted to offer great amount to Sultan Abdul Hamid to allow them to buy the land in Palestine, and Sultan Abdul Hamid rejected them completely. At that time, Rasheed Rida, once again, he started supporting Sultan Abdul Hamid. Take another example, that he also supported Sharif Hussain, the king of Al-Hijaz. But when he saw his manifesto, when he said that he wanted to be the sole Khalifa, the king of Arabs in 1917, and he read about his manifesto, he became unsatisfied. And this is how he started. He started supporting the movement of Al-Malik Abdul Aziz. And we can see that when Hijaz was affiliated to the kingdom of Ali Saud in 1924. At that time, he wrote this famous book, Al-Wahhabiyun wal-Hijaz. And we have already said that he was a great supportive of the thoughts of Imam Taymiyyah and Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. And their books were printed in his press. So we come to conclude that his main stand was because of Islam. He thought that he should be with Jamiatul Ittihad wa Taraqi, that they are going to bring some reforms to the Ottoman Empire. But when he was disappointed, he left them. And in the very same way, his stand first with Shaykh Hussain and later with King Abdulaziz, because the main stand of Rasheed Rida was because of Islam and how he could support the real Islamic movements. By this discussion, we come to know that Sheikh Rasheed Rida, he was not only a leader in an Islamic field or an Islamic dawah, he got his political stand as well. And this is why he was known to be writing against the different ideas or the different plans which were advanced by the English and by the French. And he was also known to be taking a stand against Italy and mainly about the Jewish interest in Palestine. Yes, he met their leaders, among them is wise men. He met him, but only to know about their movements and their conspiracies. When he met them, he told them that it is quite possible for Arab Bedouins to make such factions who could start a war against them, and they are able to do that. And he was of this opinion that the Arabs should be deployed for such a purpose. Why? Because at that time the Jewish settlers started doing the similar things with force with them. So he said that the force could only be combated with a similar force. But as far as the Jews who were already in Palestine, who were living there for quite a long time, he was willing to shake hands with them and to make an agreement so that they could live, both Muslims and Jews, in that land peacefully, which is known in Arabic as At-Ta'ayush As-Silmi. And before I come to the end of this speech, let me say that the impressions of his Reform movement was not confined to Egypt, was not confined to Al-Azhar. It has spread far and wide. We have seen in Egypt like people like Muhammad Mustafa al-Muraghi, Sheikh Abdul Majid Salim, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad al-Adawi, who were impressed by him, by his movements. A person like Sheikh Muhibbuddin al-Khatib, who was the publisher of a magazine called Al-Fath in 1925, and Muhammad Hamid al-Fiqi, who was the one who started the movement of Ansar al-Sunnah al-Muhammadiyya in Egypt, and Sheikh Amin al-Khatib, who established al-Jam'iyyat al-Shar'iyya and Jam'iyyat al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun in year 1928. That was in Egypt. And of course, in Saudi Arabia, we have already discussed it. And we have this correspondence between him and a Qadi of the city of Unaiza, and his correspondence with the great scholar of Saudi Arabia, Abdul Rahman bin Nasir al-Sadi. And in Syria, we have seen people like Badat al-Bita who were impressed by him. And we have also seen Sheikh Mustafa Sibai and Sheikh Al-Albani discussing about him, and let alone his very intimate friend Shaykh Arsalan of Beirut, a very, very famous personality in the whole Muslim land. And his impressions, his ideas, they reached as far as Indonesia. And we have seen there that a person named Muhammad ibn Aqil, he also established a press there, just like the press of Al-Manar, to translate the tafsir of Al-Manar in the local language. That was Sheikh Rasheed Rida, the great reformer, the Muslim scholar, who died on 23rd Jumad al-Ula, 1354, corresponding to 23rd of August, 1935. And then he was buried near the grave of his Sheikh Muhammad Abduh in the cemetery of Al-Qurafa in Cairo. And we hope that this speech could have covered the important stages of life in the life of Rasheed Rida. And as I have said earlier, that as far as his old opinions, we should have to discuss it in a separate lecture. وجزاكم الله خيرا على حسن الاستماع وصلى الله تعالى على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Jazakallah, Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. It was, mashallah, very beautiful talk. Obviously, in 1 hour, it's very difficult to cover all the contribution of an individual. I will just add that he also published many books of the Indian scholars like Siyanatul Insan and Waswasa, Sheikh Dahlan of Sheikh Bashir Sassawani on Tawheed. And he mentioned as well in his Manar articles about Sheikh Sana'ullah Amritsari, and he praised the Indo-Pak movement and their article upon Hadith. So obviously, I would thank Sheikh Suhaib Hasan. He has mentioned a lot about the efforts of Sheikh Muhammad Rasheed Rida. So our next topic will